So we finally have iOS 7. Apple released this on the 18th of September. I want to tell you what I think about it. I'm going to talk quickly, I've got a lot to get through in this video, don't want to make it too long. I noticed Apple made it into at least the Daily Mail because customers were apparently furious over the download problems that they had when they tried to update to iOS 7. Now, I experienced this as well. Apple basically had the whole world trying to download iOS 7 in one day, and they tried to roll out the release as slowly as they could. I couldn't get this update like at midnight. I had to wait till afternoon of the 18th before I could download it. And when I first tried, I got errors. Well, one error, basically it just wouldn't download, wouldn't start. But I think eventually everyone got it on that day, so I'm going to let Apple off with that and focus on talking about the operating system itself. So the first change you see is obviously the home screen. I'm not going to bother focusing on that because I'll never focus on me again. Is the home screen, the icons have changed considerably. So Apple have gone for, they had a video about this. They want the icons to be consistent, flat. They're obviously all very colourful. There are lots of jokes on the internet about how they look quite babyish and childish. Very mixed opinions on the icons actually. I'm not sure myself exactly what I think of them. Some of them I like. The calendar icon, if you've got an iPhone, take a look at it while I'm talking about it, or just pull up an image of this on the internet so you know what I mean. So yeah, ones like the calendar icon I think look good. They've got this new template that they show to create icons with, which has set guidelines to make sure that they're all consistent and a specific colour palette, but I'm not sure they are consistent actually. They've gone for a very flat approach in iOS 7. And if you take a look at these icons as well, so you know what I mean, the videos icon, they've got lots of gradients. Videos is an example. The gradient, I think, works in this one because it goes from one colour to a different colour. It goes from like a greeny colour to a bluey colour, and it maintains this flat look, and it's this modern light kind of theme they've gone for. But then the messages, FaceTime and phone icons, which are all the same, if you haven't noticed, I think that's good for consistency because they're all like the same group of apps. They all have a gradient which goes from light green to dark green, and I don't like that because it has this hint of 3D-ness in it. A gradient that changes the shade of the colour like that, to me that doesn't look totally flat. But that's just my opinion. If you like the icons, that's great. You can enjoy iOS 7 because this is like one of the major changes, I think. I don't like them so much. I think some of them are good and they could have all been great, but they're not quite there yet. Then we get to the Game Center icon. Like, oh my god, Apple, what have you done with this one? It's full of 3D bubbles. What happened to the flat approach that you were going for? It was okay, not brilliant, but kind of getting there. Most of them okay. I see what you're trying to do here. Then I swipe along and find Game Center is just completely 3D. It's not even like the gradient one where I just think it kind of has this 3D feel. So the Game Center one I'm not happy with at all. That doesn't fit with the theme. It seems like they've had some good ideas here, and maybe different people have made different icons, or it's kind of very amateurish, unfinished. It feels like it needs some head designer to come along and say, actually no, that is not quite right, do this, fix that, polish it all up. It's kind of it's not polished yet. I know this is a major change for iOS. It's probably the biggest change we've had in terms of the way it looks and feels since the original iOS came out. So I let them off for it being in its early stages, but iOS overall is not in its early stages, and when we've got iPhone 5s, iPhone 5 C's and S's. We shouldn't have an operating system that feels so unfinished and so early in its progress. It's not what we expect from Apple. We expect Apple to give us something that feels right, feels finished, feels perfect. iOS 7 does not. Now don't get me wrong, it's not all bad. They've added some nice new features. The control center, which you can swipe up from the bottom now, and you get like the torch and access to different things. This is a very welcome feature. Accessing some of this before was not easy. It's easier to do other things now. They've improved. When you double tap the home button, you get now screenshots of all the apps that are running. That is better, I think, than just the app icons. When I'm scrolling through this, once all of the kind of screenshots have loaded, it's fine. Until that's happened, it's not totally smooth. Frames are dropped, and I've noticed this occurring throughout iOS. Now, with iOS 6, I had no problems on this phone. It all ran really smoothly. This is an iPhone 4S. iOS 7, the animations are dropping frames all over the place. And I know that it's trying to do more complicated things. Parallax, for example, I'll talk about that soon. But I don't think there's any need for so many frames to be dropped. So pulling notification center down, you won't be able to see in this video, but frames are dropped. Scrolling in notification center, frames are dropped. Even like pulling up the keyboard, it is not as smooth as it was with iOS 6. Now, I think optimizations need to be made, more tests need to be done. If something cannot be done on the iPhone 4S because the hardware is not powerful enough, maybe they shouldn't try to do it. I think dropping an animation altogether would be better than having an animation that is slow and laggy and with just dropped frames. It's not good. Maybe this is a clever way to make people upgrade their iPhone, because upgrading to iOS 7, it makes your phone feel old. But I don't think that's what. It's probably not what it's not what they should be doing. It's not a good thing about iOS 7. It's not really slow. Don't get me wrong, but it's noticeably slower than iOS 6. I can't say this without it sounding really bad. But yeah, frames are dropped. That didn't happen in iOS 6. Siri has been updated. Now, Siri sounded good before. Siri has never been particularly useful to me, at least. It always fails at doing something that I ask, and it just replies with, "I can't do that." Now the voice of Siri has changed. Let's see if I can get it to say something. What is the meaning of life? Sometimes very slow. But we'll give it a minute.
I can't answer that now, but give me some time to write a very long play in which nothing happens.
I don't know if you can hear that, but Siri sounds very distorted, as though someone is nipping Siri's nose while they talk, and then really compressing the audio. I don't know what Apple have done to Siri at all, but Siri does not sound as good as it did before. But I never use Siri. If I'm in public, I feel stupid, especially when I have to repeat everything because Siri didn't catch it first time. And otherwise, it's a novelty that just wears off. I don't find it to be productive. Another thing which I think is a stupid gimmick is this parallax that they've added to the home screen. So basically, when you move your phone around, it uses the accelerometer. It's meant to make the icons look like they are in front, significantly closer than the background, and it kind of does this. And looks 3D, which again, I thought you were going for a flat approach, Apple. I don't think that the parallax effect adds anything to the home screen. With this particular background, at least, it doesn't work very well. It just looks like the icons are jiggling a little bit if you look closely. and I mean it's using my battery power to do that, and I haven't found a way to turn it off yet. To me that's a nice idea, but I'd like to be able to turn it off. Some people really like that and like the parallax effect, and that's great. I don't, but I'm stuck with it. I think it is a gimmick which looks good in the Apple Store when you've got a genius showing a new customer, but in everyday life I don't need it, I don't want it, I don't like how it looks. And I mentioned the background. I had a hard time finding a background that I liked. I went through all of the default ones, and none of them, they don't seem to have one that matches this colour palette very well. I think it's because everything is so colourful. The backgrounds clash with something all of the time. And then the whole theme overall looks better with a white iPhone. With a black iPhone, it's all too white. It matches the white iPhone. They always use the white iPhone in the keynotes and the pictures and the advertising. But it doesn't work with a black phone. Maybe two themes is the answer. Or maybe just tone it down a bit, less bright, less colourful. Just a bit, just so it looks a bit better with the black iPhone. So some of the apps have changed, the user interface is different now. If I pull the weather app up, for example, I'm gonna focus this so you can see it. This I think looks better. The whole design. Now people complain about readability issues because basically you can see they've got white on white with this text on the clouds. That's a bad idea, Apple. I can read that fine, so I don't have a problem with this. Overall, I think it's a good improvement. I like the way the weather app looks, but people are struggling to read that. Like, how did that become the final decision? Like, I know I'm saying personally this is fine to me, but I can still see people are going to struggle with this. Let me focus on myself again. There we go. I'm not sure who decided that this could make it out into like the final release. White text on a white background. Not great in terms of readability in places like this. But like I said, it's fine for me. I think it looks good. Overall, compared to the old one. What I do have issues with is how intuitive some of the apps are. So, back to the weather app. You can see the layout is now different compared to how it was before. So we've got just numbers along the top, numbers underneath. You need to kind of think about it and use it before you figure out what it means and what you're looking at. And before I refocus, let me just pull up the calendar app. When I first opened the calendar app in iOS 7, I was presented with a screen which looked like this. And it's not as intuitive as it should be with Apple. I don't think it is anyway. So what do I mean? We've got just numbers along the top and the days of the week. I had to press it to realise what was going on there. And like, okay, this is how I select a day, and then this is going to slide to the left and right. And then I realised I could drag this, and I was like, oh well, the days don't drag along with the numbers. That doesn't make sense. And then you leave go, and it always snaps into place. Like, okay, now I understand. So I had to play with it first before I really understood. Moving out into this year view, this looks nice. And when you go in step by step, you realise why it looks the way it does. It makes sense when you start out in year view and move inwards. If you start in the day view, it doesn't make sense, to me at least. So I think, like I said before, it's a good idea, it's just not fully fleshed out yet. I think this could be good, the way it zooms in and zooms in again from the year to the month to the day. Really nice idea, but once you get into the day, it's not quite looking as intuitive and as simple as it should. So it's getting there. Apple, you really need to just work on these issues a little bit. Get an update out and just polish it all up a bit. So, will you have any trouble switching from iOS 6 to iOS 7 with new layouts in the apps? I don't think so. if you're an iPhone user, most of the apps are identical in terms of layout. They're just, the colours have changed, the fonts have changed. So most apps you won't have any trouble at all. Apps like Calendar, like I said, you just need to press around and figure out what's going on. It takes 30 seconds and you've sussed it out. So you're not going to have any problems upgrading in terms of being able to use the operating system. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I focused myself very well again. One major change that Apple have done, so they've gone for this kind of layered effect. The control center is a layer in front of everything else and you can kind of see through it, and I like this layered idea because it can still be flat. They can keep this flat design. The layers can be 2D and on top of each other. This is why I don't like the parallax effect. It separates the layers and then it's no longer flat. But the layers is good. And apps, now let me find an app with a title without sharing people's personal information. Settings. Perfect. So the settings app. Oh, let's focus again. That was terrible. But the menu bar at the top with the battery life and everything in is now integrated into the title bar of apps. Now this is not how it was before. It was always separate, and the reason I think this is a good change is because before it felt like the app was always distinct from the operating system around it. It was like you had this operating system which looked nice, and then you were running kind of a sandbox app which was separate. Now it feels much more integrated, as though everything is connected and works together. I think that improves the experience overall. They've added other kind of behind the scenes things which will add to this experience. Apps can now update themselves more in the background when you're not focused on that app. So they can multitask more than they could before. I think all of these things are going to work together to make it feel like a more complete operating system experience rather than iOS and then an app and then back to iOS and then a separate app. You want it all to flow nicely and work together, and I think they're going in the right direction with that. So what effect does this have on battery life? I haven't done any formal tests or anything. I haven't noticed any changes in battery life on my iPhone 4S. It seems like it's going down quicker than usual, but that's because I'm using it more than usual since I've just updated. Maybe the battery life's better or worse. Either way, it hasn't changed much as far as I can tell. iOS 7 has a few bugs and glitches. Obviously I've talked a lot about the dropped frames. If you look at all of your open apps and then try to swipe 3 away at once, you're often left with a random icon that you can't get rid of. Apparently if you rename a folder and then reboot the iPhone, the folder will go back to its original name. These are things that shouldn't have made it to a release that goes out to the whole world in one day. So again, it feels rushed and unfinished. So is it worth upgrading to iOS 7 despite my negative attitude towards everything? I'm gonna say yes. iOS has to change. It can't stay the same as iOS 6 forever. I think although Apple haven't done everything as well as they should have, it is a step in the right direction. I was really excited about iOS 7 because it looked good in the keynotes, and in theory it seems great, but when you actually use it you're like, oh, it's not quite there. But step in the right direction. I think a few more updates and it could be back to being a great OS that we all love. So the update is inevitable. You can't stick with an older version because you'll miss out on some nice new features that are in iOS 7. The features are worth upgrading for. Some people like the design, so it's not definitely bad. It seems to be mostly down to opinion, a lot of the design choices that Apple have made. So I'd say upgrade, see what you think. It can only get better, I hope, with future releases. So yeah, tell me what you think of iOS 7. I think, to briefly sum up this long video, step in the right direction, good ideas, good design ethos that they've tried to go for, but it's in its early stages. It's not consistent enough for my liking. They need someone to come in and take charge and kind of polish it up, make it look more finished, more professional, and make it feel like iOS should. We expect nothing but the best from Apple. This is why I'm being so critical of them. I wouldn't be this critical with another company, more than likely. But Apple have this reputation for having really perfect products, so that's what they need to make sure they do. So hopefully we'll see some big improvements in future versions of iOS. Thanks for watching. Oh, need a drink. I can get through this.